The city never slept, but sometimes the silence beneath its noise carried something darker than restlessness. Ian had always been drawn to the sky, to the endless sprawl of stars above the chaos of his world, but lately even the stars seemed different. He didn't know why, but he felt watched. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly. It was instinct, the same instinct that had once told early humans when a predator was near even before they could see it. He had that feeling every night now, like eyes far older than his species were fixed upon him. He had dismissed the whispers when they first began. Stories about vanishing people, unexplained outages, strange vibrations that rattle windows without earthquakes or thunder. But then he had seen it himself, and there was no turning away. A streak of light cutting through the sky, halting in place as if gravity were irrelevant, moving with deliberate precision before vanishing into nothing. It hadn't been the first sighting. For months, pilots, fishermen, even police patrols had spoken of the same lights, the same triangular shadows, but their voices were always silenced by laughter, denial, or government statements that explained nothing and contradicted themselves. Zara had noticed, too. She had grown up across the street, but in the past months she had been avoiding crowds, avoiding noise. She confessed to Ian that she had begun hearing a sound when no one else did, a hum too deep for words, a vibration that seemed to crawl into her bones. When he laughed nervously, she didn't. She only showed him a photograph, worn and cracked with age, that her father had once taken in the desert, and it was a blurry shape above barren earth, sharp edges too perfect for coincidence, too alien for comfort. Her father had worked in intelligence, she explained. He had died insisting on one sentence she couldn't forget: "They are already here." Ian wanted to believe she was mistaken, but the evidence piled higher each day. Reports of children waking in the night screaming, of figures at their windows, of electronics switching on and off without reason, of sudden disappearances of pets and livestock that left no tracks. They sounded like urban legends, yet they spread faster than they could be contained. Still, none of it compared to what happened that night on the rooftop when both Ian and Zara looked up and saw the shape hovering, silent, precise, defying everything their world knew about flight. It had not been far away. Not a streak of light across the stars, but something closer, watching. A tall figure appeared moments later at the rooftop opposite theirs, its form outlined but never settling into human definition. Its head tilted, eyes glowing faintly blue, a mockery of human shape. And then the voice entered Ian's mind, not through his ears but through thought itself. A whisper layered with thousands of voices. One word rising above them all: "We have always been here." He collapsed with pain that was not pain, more like his mind being folded against itself. When the sound ceased, silence fell heavy, but his world was no longer the same. He had seen it. Zara had seen it. They could not be dismissed as dreamers anymore. That was when Zara revealed more. Her father's notebook filled with strange symbols, half-decoded notes about something he called the architects. Aliens not as conquerors, but as shapers. Quiet overseers who nudge human history, like a hand guiding a child across the street. Wars, technology, revolutions, none of it random, all of it seeded and adjusted like experiments in a lab. Humanity had never been alone, had never been sovereign. The realization unsettled him more than the figure itself. To think that their triumphs, their greatest achievements, may not have been their own but breadcrumbs left to lead them toward a future chosen by others. It was infuriating. It was humiliating. But most of all, it was terrifying. Because if that was true, then humanity was nothing more than a subject, an experiment in progress, and experiments could be terminated when they failed. Evidence surfaced faster now. His phone displayed messages without signal. "Do not trust them. Run." News broadcasts suddenly cut to static in certain districts whenever UFO reports spiked. Military exercises expanded in deserts and oceans where sightings were most common, but no one explained what the military was preparing for. Rumors claimed that governments already knew, that recovered crafts were hidden in black sites across the world, studied and reversed, but too advanced to replicate. Whistleblowers hinted at shadow programs, at men's silence for speaking truths too dangerous. And through it all, ordinary people kept vanishing without explanation. Ian tried to dismiss it as mass hysteria, until the disappearances came too close. His neighbor, an elderly man who tended his rooftop garden each evening, simply never returned home one night. His door was unlocked, dinner half-eaten, television still running. Police wrote it off as a runaway. Ian knew better. Zara's own cousin was found wandering miles outside the city, barefoot, incoherent, hours after vanishing from his locked bedroom. He spoke of cold rooms, blinding lights, hands too thin and long to belong to any human. Doctors diagnosed psychosis. Zara's family whispered it was something else. Ian began keeping a journal, not for answers but for survival. If his mind was ever tampered with, if memories were taken, at least his words would remain. But as he wrote, he realized the entries were not just warnings for himself. They were records for humanity, because what he was witnessing was bigger than him, bigger than his fear. Each day added new layers of unease. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Strangers walked with a rhythm too measured, eyes unblinking for too long. Once on a bus, he sat across from a man whose skin seemed almost perfect, too smooth, too symmetrical, until he smiled. The smile stretched just slightly too wide. Ian left the bus 2 stops early, trembling. Sleep became fragile. Dreams blurred with reality. He saw faces hovering over him, felt paralysis pinning him to his bed, while whispers crawled into his ears. Sometimes he woke with scars he couldn't remember earning, faint burns along his arm, bruises across his ribs. Zara confessed the same. The realization hit both of them at once. These weren't dreams. These were visitations. Why? That question haunted him more than any nightmare. Why humanity? Why Earth? They had the technology to destroy, to conquer, to take, but they hadn't. Instead, they studied, probed, manipulated from shadows. He remembered the words, "We have always been here." Perhaps they weren't visitors at all. Perhaps Earth was theirs long before it was humanity's. He dug deeper. Libraries, archives, ancient myths. Every culture spoke of beings descending from the skies, gods, angels, demons. But what if they were never divine? What if humanity had always mistaken them for gods simply because it lacked the words for anything else? From Sumerian carvings of winged beings to Egyptian sky gods, from Vedic texts of celestial chariots to Mayan depictions of star travelers, the pattern was there. The architects had guided humanity since its dawn. But the question shifted from why to why now. If they had been here for millennia, why reveal themselves so clearly now? Why escalate? The answer came in fragments. Climate change. Fear had always been a shadow over humanity, but now it became a cage. People vanished in the middle of crowded streets, and the world adjusted as though it was normal. Governments issued vague statements, offering explanations that collapsed under scrutiny. Faulty infrastructure, natural disasters, rising crime. But those who had seen the figures in the dark, who had heard the whispers inside their skulls, knew better. Something was moving in the silence, and it was not human. Ian could no longer dismiss what he had witnessed. The rooftop encounter had shattered the walls of doubt, and the strange messages on his phone only confirmed what Zara's father had always feared. The architects were no longer hiding. They were embedding themselves more deeply, replacing people, guiding them like puppets. The scariest part was how effortless it was for them. You could stand across from one in the market, shake its hand, and never know. But there was something the architects hadn't accounted for. Paranoia spreads faster than fear. Ian wasn't alone anymore. Others had seen, others had felt, and they were searching for answers. Zara introduced him to a group hidden in the city's underbelly. People who lived on the run, bound together by one common realization. They had encountered the infiltrators and survived. The group's leader was an ex-soldier named Rahim, broad-shouldered and grim-eyed. The kind of man whose life had already been burned by violence. His voice carried conviction when he spoke. They think we're livestock. They think we can't tell. They're wrong. Humanity has always fought back, even against impossible odds. That's what they don't understand about us. The resistance was small, scattered, and fragile, but it had one thing the architects didn't: desperation forged into creativity. They couldn't outmatch alien technology, but they could improvise. They experimented with radio frequencies, hacking signals, and discovered that certain bursts of sound interfered with the hum that haunted them. They found that the architects' disguises faltered under ultraviolet light, their perfect human faces distorting like cracked glass. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ian learned fast. His fear hardened into resolve. With Zara, he began gathering information, patterns of disappearances, areas of heightened electromagnetic interference, strange broadcasts hidden in radio static. The deeper they dug, the more the puzzle formed. The architects were not preparing for conquest. They were tightening control. Humanity was not being invaded. Humanity was being harvested. It became clear during one of their missions. The group intercepted a convoy traveling outside the city under military escort. When they disabled the trucks and pried them open, what they found froze their blood. Pods filled with unconscious humans, their bodies connected to alien machines, their brains pulsing with energy that did not belong. They were alive, but not themselves. Their memories, their identities, something was being extracted. Zara whispered the word none of them wanted to say aloud. Data. The realization was worse than death. The architects weren't killing. They were collecting. Human thought, creativity, emotion, it was being stolen, cataloged, consumed. The most precious part of humanity was the very thing they had come for. Rahim clenched his fists. They think they can strip us bare and leave us shells. Not while I'm breathing. For the first time, humanity struck back. Small skirmishes, hit-and-run tactics, sabotage of alien operations hidden behind human governments. They targeted communication nodes, destroyed equipment, disrupted experiments. And to their surprise, the architects weren't invincible. They were advanced, yes, but arrogant. They hadn't expected resistance at this scale. They hadn't expected humanity to notice. Every small victory mattered, not because of damage dealt, but because it proved the architects could bleed. But victories came at a price. The architects retaliated with precision, striking resistance cells with brutal efficiency. People Ian had spoken to the day before vanished the next, their homes erased as though they never existed. Families who harbored fighters disappeared into silence. Fear spread even faster than hope, and the group realized they weren't just fighting an enemy. They were fighting against erasure. Ian felt it one night as he sat writing in his journal. The lights flickered, and for a brief second, his own reflection in the window did not match his movement. The smile came a moment too late, the blink a moment too early. His chest tightened. They weren't just infiltrating the world. They were infiltrating identity itself. He confided in Zara, who revealed something she had hidden. Her father's final message, written in code. Together, they deciphered it. The words chilled them both. Their greatest weakness is not what they lack. It is what they cannot understand. They cannot predict us. It was a core of HFY. Humanity was chaotic, irrational, emotional. It was both a curse and a gift. The architects thrived on patterns, control, predictability. They didn't understand sacrifice, love, rage, hope. They saw those as flaws. But those flaws were the very things that had carried humanity through every disaster, every war, every extinction event. Humanity had never been the strongest, never the fastest, never the smartest, yet it had always survived. That was the one truth the architects had overlooked. The resistance clung to that truth. They built decoys, spread disinformation, weaponized unpredictability itself. Attacks were planned not with strategy but with chaos. Random timings, reckless risks, illogical decisions that confuse their enemy. And it worked. For the first time, alien operatives were cornered, their disguises ripped away, their shimmering forms collapsing under the weight of ultraviolet light and human fury. Ian stood over one of them, watching its body flicker between forms, its voice a dozen languages at once. It looked at him not with hatred, but with confusion, as though it couldn't comprehend why a fragile creature would risk itself for nothing. He answered with the only words that mattered. Because we're human. But victory bred desperation. The architects shifted tactics, embedding themselves deeper into governments, whispering into the ears of leaders who denied everything even as their people disappeared. They turned humanity against itself, creating fear, division, suspicion. The resistance found itself hunted not only by aliens, but by their own governments, branded as terrorists for exposing truths too dangerous for power. Then came betrayal. Someone within the group was not who they claimed. They had walked, spoken, and fought alongside them, but in the end their eyes betrayed them under the ultraviolet light. The revelation fractured the group. Trust collapsed. People turned on one another, afraid of who might not be real.